Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes. This is Legal Matters, the program that's been designed to address critical, sometimes contentious issues facing consumers and businesses today. As we say, it's legal information, it's practical solutions, and straight talk on a wide variety of issues from bankruptcy and finance and family law to Social Security, workers' compensation, mediation, and more. To address those issues, we have with us Jackie Grasso from Audette, Bazar, Cordiero, Grasso Law Firm in East Providence. Dave is not with us today. Our last topic was bullying and cyberbullying. What's the punishment? What's right? What should be done? Today, different kind of ogres, other ogres. Some of the banks responsible for undermining our economy and our homeowners by granting those undeserved, impractical, unethical loans, they're at it again. At least some of them are. Now there are undeserved, unethical handling of refinanced loans, and people are being foreclosed upon. After homeowners had been squeezed financially, they're suddenly evicted with no recourse, but they might be. So while people are riled and saying that they're not going to take it anymore, I guess it's even escalated to class action suit. What's been going on, Jackie? Give us a little update.
Oh, this is what I dubbed Foreclosure Gate, and what's happening is it's become a domino effect all over the country. I think the first class action suit came in, I don't know, about 6-7 months ago in Florida, and now all the other states are following through. Some attorney generals are following through because we are finding that some of the foreclosures that are happening are actually illegally done. Either they're not complying with the state mandates or the state procedure on the process, or they are not processing the correct paperwork. Sometimes what they're doing is they're signing documents. They're not reading them, so they've been employing people just to sign thousands and thousands of documents, and they've been calling them robo-signers. So whereas with one of the banks, they had an admission from one of the employees that all the person did was sign foreclosure documents, up to 10,000 of them, not even look at them, not even read them. And that's what kind of spurred where we are today with the foreclosure process.
Now you say that it started, the class action suit, that is, started in Florida. Was that because people were upside down then, or they weren't and they just lost jobs? If they're in Florida, there are a lot of retirees. What was that situation
I think what
like?
was happening in Florida is that it was hit badly by the economic crisis. For whatever reason in Florida, the values just plummeted. A lot more than they plummeted in other areas in the country. So people were finding themselves upside down in their homes, and by upside down we naturally mean that the value of the house is worth far less than the balance of their mortgage or mortgages. And so this was also before the HAMP program took effect, which was the governmental program for modifications. People were not able to catch up on their mortgages. For whatever reason, they couldn't get a loan modification, and the foreclosures just started multiplying there. And some of the affected people have gotten together, banded together, hired an attorney, and all have the same complaint. We were not notified, or we were in the middle of maybe a modification. We were granted the modification, started paying a new mortgage payment, yet we were still foreclosed upon. Okay, so this is the problem: is you have this big bank, almost like Big Brother. You have one big bank that might be in Idaho, and then you have a mortgage modification department that might be, for instance, in Massachusetts. One isn't communicating with the other. And I think we've talked before about the travesties of the loan modification process. It's just impossible to get an answer, get someone on the phone, track paperwork, and it falls through the cracks. Next thing you know, these people are having a flag planted on their front lawn saying, we have a sale today.
Of course, Bank of America is the one with Countrywide having been attached to it in its servicing of loans. They were the culprits initially out of this Florida, out of Miami, I believe. And apparently they have responded by saying that they were going to be calling a moratorium, and on their website now they've had several postings about what to do if you're in foreclosure or if you're almost in foreclosure, you're in foreclosure and you might want to stay in the house or you might not want to stay in the house. Has that really made a difference? Or I still hear of people who are being evicted, or at least getting the notices that they're being evicted.
Yeah, exactly. I received a phone call in my office just a few weeks ago a client or a potential client inquiring as to the status of a letter they received from an attorney, a notice of foreclosure. They were concerned that the foreclosure was going to happen, and unbeknownst to me, my understanding was that the moratorium was across the board with Bank of America, so all over the country. But I was wrong. I advised the client, make sure you contact the attorney for the bank just to see if it's going to go forward before we do anything. Sure enough, they contacted the attorney, and regardless of the moratorium, it was still going forward.
What state was this in?
It was Massachusetts.
It was from Massachusetts. And the property was in Massachusetts?
Massachusetts, yeah.
And so how does that play out now?
They either had to do something to stop the foreclosure, and unfortunately people will have to do what would be the last resort, file a bankruptcy to stop it, or at least temporarily.
Does that stop it, Jackie?
It stops it. It just puts a little Band-Aid on it. It stops it, not permanently, but just temporarily, because what happens is the bank then can petition the United States Bankruptcy Court for permission to proceed with that foreclosure process. But at least it stops it, and people at least have the security in knowing, they're not going to lose their home.
Now, we've talked about foreclosures before.
Yeah.
I suppose this is probably a good time to recap some of that. But isn't it true that by the time you're receiving a foreclosure notice, that's the result of many other previous either writings or calls before that actually happens? So back it up a little bit and go through this.
Well, every state has laws on what is required before a foreclosure can start. So you have some states that are judicial notice states, which means in order to do the foreclosure, you have to go to court first. You have some states that are non-judicial. And in order to proceed with a foreclosure, the bank still needs to put you on notice that the loan is in default. So they'll send you a default letter, and for some states they'll give you 30 days to cure your default. Default meaning you haven't paid your loan, and they can send the letter out if it's 1 month in delinquent, 2 months, 3 months. Typically I don't see default letters come out unless it's more than 3 or 4 months. But once a person gets that notice, and it has to be any person who is a mortgagor on the house. So any person who owns the house or any person signing the mortgage has to get notice of that foreclosure. Typically they send 1 regular mail, 1 certified mail. They have to give a certain amount of time for the person to cure the default, which means pay back all of the arrearage, or then you run the risk of foreclosure. Once that deadline goes by without payment, then the attorney for the bank has to notify the owner of the home that there's going to be a foreclosure, and then it has to be advertised, I think, once a week for 3 weeks in your local paper. So if you live in Providence, they can't put it in the Fall River Herald. It's got to be in a local paper. And again, certified mail, the person needs to be given notice of the date of the foreclosure. And that's simply that.
Now, is Rhode Island a judicial or non-judicial?
Rhode Island, my understanding, is non-judicial. Massachusetts is judicial. Okay, so before you can start a foreclosure, you have to go to land court in Massachusetts. The other thing, too, is what banks are not taking notice of is the fact that we're in the middle of 2 wars, and we have a lot of service members that are serving overseas. And we have something called the Soldiers, Sailors, and Relief Act, which I think is a different name now. But that basically means that any litigation that's pending against an active serviceman serving overseas has to stop. Yeah, exactly.
What else does that pertain to? That's very curious. I don't mean to take a tangent, but that's
I think any litigation, if they're in the middle of a family court matter, unless it's an emergency, I believe, but I'm not very familiar with that act, but I would think any type of litigation would have to be stayed.
Well, not surprisingly, because of what happened with Bank of America and some of these other mortgage companies who were not processing things correctly despite Obama's loan modifications or whatever, they're not doing it properly. Many of them have responded on their websites. Yes, there have been stories in the newspaper, but they've responded in their websites. There's websites. Some of them are legitimate. Yep. Other things, it seems, are cropping up as illegitimate. In other words, call us if you're having, or email us if you're having trouble with your foreclosure.
Oh, home rescue programs. Yeah.
And in addition to that, they're even ranting blogs about this. If people don't know how to handle the banks in terms of what could be a false affidavit that's been coming forth, how do they handle something that might be an illegitimate? I mean, some are very obvious. Some of them really look like they're not legit. But those who are look legit but aren't. How does the average homeowner discern that? What do you suggest that they do?
Well, first of all, the old cliche, if it's too good to be true, it isn't true, okay? People are getting solicited from foreclosure rescue services, if you want to call it that. In most cases, they are real estate agents, and they get notice of the foreclosure by looking in the paper, because remember I said you have to publicly notice a foreclosure. They're soliciting the owners of the home, and they're giving them the pitch that I can help you in your home, I can keep you in your house, just contact me, pay me, and we'll do X, Y, and Z. Well, if somebody gets a letter like that and they're going to act on it, you should call a lawyer before you do that, or call the Better Business Bureau, Google the name in the computer, contact your state attorney general's office, Consumer Affairs Department, see if there are any claims against that person. Because what is the result of some of those foreclosure rescue companies is they're actually keeping the person in the house, but the requirement is that the owner of the home transfer title to the rescue company. The rescue company therein pays back all of the mortgage arrearage. So people are thinking, you know, great, I'm back here, I can stay in my home, then all I need to do is pay back the real estate company who helped me save my home. And in reality, they don't even own the home anymore because they're transferring the title.
So is it true that no one should ever do that?
No, you never want to transfer a title like that, especially if there's a mortgage on a house. You cannot transfer your interest and title because there's a law that's called the due on sales clause. So if you own a piece of property, like I own my house with my spouse, I transfer my interest in my house to you. The bank finds out I have a mortgage with them. They can accelerate my loan. They can default the mortgage because I'm transferring an asset that has a lien against it, subject to a mortgage.
That you don't wholly own.
Exactly. Now, the only time that due on sales clause doesn't apply is if it's a transfer pursuant to a divorce. Or, of course, unless you sell the home.
And then a lawyer is involved anyway, so
Yes.
you'll know that's
Yeah.
going to be trafficked through and held legal.
Yeah.
If we've talked about this a little bit before too, but if someone is receiving notes that they are behind in their payments, and it hasn't quite gone to foreclosure yet, bank mortgage companies will often say, are you interested in staying in your home? Are you interested in, or would you consider leaving? That was actually a box to be checked. Are most people, if they're underwater right now, I understand that Obama administration had said that there's more money being funneled into banks so that they should be able to refinance. Under what circumstances should someone consider leaving versus sticking it out and trying to home refi?
I think if you have two people that are working in a home and unfortunately their mortgage is not affordable to them, I think they should at least attempt to do a mortgage modification. Now understand, if the loan is a HUD guaranteed loan, they have to be offered that option from the mortgage company. So somewhere in their letter they will tell you, we have the ability to offer this to you if you want to apply for a modification. Quite simply, it's a matter of math. If you can't afford to be there, if you're having a hard time even paying your monthly bills, set aside the mortgage, then reality needs to set in and you need to decide, is this something that I'm going to do? Am I going to kill myself just to pay a mortgage? And it's your primary home. It's not an easy thing to accept. But quite simply, if they just can't if they cannot afford it, if both people are out of work collecting unemployment, you can't depend on the fact that unemployment's going to last forever. Because
that would be a determining factor, sure.
Right now it depends on Congress extending the benefits. That would be a determining factor. And they have an option. They can either walk away from the home. They have a couple options, a few of them. They can walk away from the home, and then the foreclosure will happen. And knowing that they might be responsible for the negative balance or the deficiency balance, they can do a short sale, which is you get the bank to agree to sell the house for less than the payoff on the bank. They can also do what's called a deed in lieu of foreclosure, which is the owners transferring all of their interest in the house back to the bank. Okay? That saves the embarrassment of a foreclosure, and it also gives you time to move out, And I think it's a lot less stressful than having to worry about somebody knocking on your door, serving you paperwork for a foreclosure, or someone putting a flag on your lawn saying, here's the sale day.
Would that be an advisable consideration now, considering that Bank of America and those others, and I don't mean just to harp on Bank of America, but certainly they're one of the notorious ones, if they're supposed to be having a reprieve, or they're supposed to be holding this in abeyance until they sort through who did the robo-signing and whatever.
Yep.
So is it better for someone to hang on just a little bit longer because, in fact, they may be able to keep that home when they didn't think they could?
Exactly. You know, what the banks are doing is they're employing individuals, I call them affidavit slaves. They're hiring people just to sign foreclosure affidavits, and admittedly, they're saying, we never even looked at the documents.
And of course, in this case, you could say that the banks would be buyer beware because they hired people who are doing this falsely. It's perjury.
And the bank's ultimately responsible because they did the hiring. You know, they're employees of the bank.
But an average homeowner, how would they know whether they were robo-signed and it got railroaded through quickly? Number one, it happened before in their favor when everyone was given loans even if they didn't deserve them. Now it's being processed and it's being rushed to foreclosure. How do you know whether or not that has
Well, if you think that
adversely
happened,
affected
contact
you?
a lawyer.
How would you know if it is?
You don't. I mean, you really don't, because before all this happened, people would just get notice and nobody really questioned it. Now, because it's so rampant, now everybody's questioning it because somewhere along the line there was a problem with the bank having documents signed that gave them the ability to proceed with foreclosure. I would say if they think something's wrong, go with your gut instinct. Contact an attorney. Some of the states' attorney generals are involved, so the Consumer Affairs Division can advise you. You can go on the internet. If you have a Bank of America loan, if you have a Bank of America loan and you're delinquent and facing a foreclosure, then you need to contact someone and get it stopped. Okay, that's what you have to do, because if it's Bank of America, you know what's been publicized, what's been in the news lately. There are some other banks as well. I think Countrywide, which was taken over by Bank of America. I do think it's SunTrust, which was the one in Florida, GMAC. The other problem, too, is people don't know who own their mortgages.
That's a very good point.
That's the other problem. How many times have you gotten a mortgage, within 24 hours of closing it, you get a different statement from a different bank, so they go ahead and they sell these mortgages, and trying to track down the title is almost impossible.
As you've said before, if you were in trouble with a creditor, then one of the first things you should do is try to call that creditor. That sounds good if it's a straight line, but if it's not, because that mortgage or that loan has been sold and resold and resold, and you know that very likely every time that happens, some paperwork or perhaps even the payment itself might have fallen through the cracks, which precipitated something like a foreclosure, it's very hard for that average consumer, homeowner, to track down and find who has the hot potato next.
Well, they have to be notified. Is that when they need you? Yeah, they have to be notified if they're going to be selling a loan. Now, when you go to a refinance or a sale and you're getting a mortgage, they do have the borrowers sign a document that gives them the right to assign the loan. So, really, that means they're selling the loan on the open market, and now that's what caused the bubble to burst, because they were selling bad loans on the open market. If there's going to be a foreclosure and your mortgage company has changed throughout the tenure of your having that particular mortgage, then in order for that to proceed, they have to record what's called an assignment of title. So I have gotten some inquiries in my office. I actually got a client, came to my office with a foreclosure notice, got notified, it was published. I went down to the Registry of Deeds office, looked to see if there was an assignment of title recorded, and it wasn't. Okay, so that is, if the foreclosure proceeds, now you have a problem with your foreclosure. Because who owns the title? They have to record the title. If I give title to you, the only way to know that you own it is if you record it with your local Registry of Deeds.
It's a good thing to know. Now, for all of these people who say, I think that there's an error, and they're trying to track down that there's an error. Let's say there's an error. Let's say that they have a right to some recourse. If you're not part of that class action organization that's taking place in Florida and now is being considered to spread in other states, what should you do?
You have the ability to file a lawsuit. You have a breach of contract lawsuit. Okay, so you have that ability. I think we mentioned at one of the other shows the RESPA laws, the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. That's a federal statute, so you can file in federal court for violation of that. If you don't, just pick something. I mean, not pick something, but you have a contract. They breach the contract. Okay, RESPA basically says you're entitled, amongst other things, to accurate servicing on your loan and appropriate servicing on your loan. So that's what they can do.
Now, with this class action settlement that's going on, what is likely to be a settlement? I know I've read things that they're going to set up some sort of a fund that's comparable to the oil spill fund for those victims. Is there anything that's new about that? Is there anything that we need to be aware of or that our viewers should be aware of in case they're likely to sign on to that?
Actually, what they should do is go on the internet and just put foreclosure class action. And you can fill out a form and just to send in an inquiry to see if you are an individual that was affected by it, and then you would get a response back. The attorney in Florida, I can't think of his name, but there are several class actions around the country. You can participate in the class action. At some point, Bank of America, if they're one of the defendants in the class action, they have to provide names of all of the borrowers that would be affected by that, and then the borrowers are then notified if they want to be in the class or if they want to opt out. So by opting out, that means you cannot participate in the lawsuit. You have to file a private lawsuit. So it's better with a class action because obviously the costs are next to nothing.
For you individually?
Yeah.
Okay.
The settlement, I don't know what the settlement, I haven't heard of any settlements coming around.
How about the fact that you could have been evicted and now you've discovered that it might have been done incorrectly? Sure, you may say you want to join that class action suit. Meanwhile, you're if not homeless. Are you ever going to be able to retake your home? And then on the other side of that, Jackie, what happens to somebody who perhaps innocently and reasonably bought that home, moved into that home? They didn't know what was going on. What would the courts do? I mean, obviously, I can smell litigation happening.
Yeah, you have bona fide purchases there.
But what happens to the new and innocent homeowner versus the poor victim?
If there's no redemption period in the state in which you live,
that mean?
That means it's a time period where the homeowner has the ability to reclaim the home by paying off the mortgage. You simply have to pay off what was due.
That would be before you were evicted, though, right?
No, after.
After
you're not evicted. After the foreclosure happens and you're no longer in the home. Yeah.
Okay.
If it's sold, then you have an individual who's a bona fide purchaser, not knowing that this litigation could happen. If the person can't get back into the home, if there is no redemption period, then I think they're entitled to some damages, some monetary damages for their loss.
And who would they sue?
The bank.
They would sue the bank.
They would have to sue the bank. Yeah.
Has that been going on lately?
I haven't heard of that. In my research, I didn't see that, but that was in the back of my mind that is going to happen. They're going to, if those individuals can actually be part of the class action as well.
When you've seen day after day and week and month after month in the newspaper, how many people have been forced out of their home and there's mortgagees, sales, or whatever, 10 pages long, it would stand to reason that someone swooped in, picked up that house for a song, moved in, and then only finds out later on that maybe they shouldn't have been in that house. They're innocent, but somebody else has certainly had been greatly disadvantaged. What are the chances, if someone hasn't been evicted yet, that they really could strike his or her own bargain with the bank, considering now all of these banks are very aware that they might have done something wrong, or maybe one of their robo-signers or one of their
affidavit
slaves has possibly done something wrong. Are they at a better place than usual now?
I think they would be now than they were a year ago or 18 months ago. Just try your best. If you're having a hard time communicating with the bank, go over to Rhode Island Housing, where they have a home rescue program going on. They can help you. You can hire a private attorney to do it for you. Obviously, there would be a cost to that. But you have the knowledge knowing that there's an attorney that's handling it for you, and you're on top of it, and it's not falling through the cracks.
And what happens with you if you happen to be the renter and the landowner, the homeowner, had been paid by you, the rent, but he didn't turn in that money to his bank for the mortgage? Now what happens?
That's a problem. I think the City of Providence enacted some ordinances to require banks to notify tenants that there would be a foreclosure because people were they were renting a home. The next thing you know, they have to be evicted because the bank bought it. What happens is the banks have to notify the tenants. The banks have to notify the tenants, at least in the City of Providence.
And then what if even if you're not hired to represent that tenant right now, what should a tenant do? He said, I'm innocent. I paid that rent. I have even my canceled check probably.
No.
What do they do?
I think that they have no choice. They'd have to be out unless the bank allows them to stay there and pay rent to the bank. Maybe they have some recourse against the landlord for breach of contract. Yeah, they can breach of contract, because if you sign a lease or if you agree to live in a home from month to month and you're evicted prior to that date through no fault of his or her own, then I think the tenant has a recourse against the landlord, again, for breach of contract.
And what if then that landlord who should have been paying his mortgage all along and didn't decides to say, sorry, I'm bankrupt?
Yeah.
What
There
are
you go.
You're in
Unless
trouble.
you can prove fraud.
Fraud.
Unless you can file a fraudulent adversary complaint against the landlord. And if there's some fraud involved, then you may be able to recover some damages there.
What about Section 8? We haven't really spoken about that. How might that be affected? Section 8 for those who have other issues, who are paying less for their rent because they have certain circumstances.
And it's subsidized.
And it's subsidized,
I think it would be the same effect. I shouldn't disqualify them from benefits, but if the landlord owns other homes where they are Section 8 approved, I think that is enough to have the Section 8 approval or terminate the Section 8. Not for the tenant, for the owner of the home.
Under those circumstances, if that person was under Section 8 housing, are they more likely to be able to strike the deal with the bank or the mortgage holder themselves because they've already shown in good faith that they've been paying? I mean, is there more leniency granted for someone who's in those special circumstances?
Yeah, I would think so, because of the public housing.
Sounds nice.
It's not that easy to just get another home that's Section 8 approved.
In the short time we have left, what is your best bet about how to avoid being scammed during a foreclosure? Do you go to the AG's website first?
Go to the AG's website. There should be some information on any scams that are presently happening around the state or around the country. Just buyer beware. That's basically what it is.
Isn't that always the case? Well, once again, we thank you for tuning in to Legal Matters. Our discussions will continue. We thank you for paying attention, and we hope that some of this information has been helpful to you.